It was the third day of my business trip. I was in the hotel lobby in a city I barely knew when I saw my wife, Clara. She was wearing a skin-tight dress I'd never seen before, her arm linked with a stranger's, laughing with a brilliance that felt like a slap in the face. An hour ago, she told me over the phone she was fresh out of the shower, about to curl up with my pillow and go to sleep. In that single moment, my world collapsed. I didn't rush over. I'm not that kind of idiot. I decided to stay to figure this out. I was going to nail this cheating pair to the wall with cold, hard evidence. I followed them. I took pictures from a distance. I paid for information. I discovered she was a regular at exclusive clubs, saw her making effortless small talk with all kinds of men. I even saw a tattoo, something I never knew existed. Everything about her was so familiar, yet completely alien. I thought I had it all figured out, that I'd corner her with the proof, and she'd leave with nothing but the clothes on her back. Then I uncovered her other identity. I dug into the records of an orphanage that had closed down 20 years ago, and I realized I wasn't being cheated on. I was losing my mind. Day 3. Las Vegas. The deal was pretty much in the bag. We were just waiting to sign the contracts tomorrow. That evening, the client insisted on a celebratory night out, dragging us to some high-roller lounge on the Strip. I can't hold my liquor, so I used the excuse of needing to tweak the presentation slides and slipped away. I was alone in the hotel lobby, about to scan my key card for the elevator, when a familiar figure in my peripheral vision made my heart stop cold. It was too familiar. So familiar my heart actually seized in my chest. It was Clara. My wife, Clara. What was she doing here? Wasn't she supposed to be hundreds of miles away in our quiet California suburb, doing my laundry, waiting for me to come home? We just talked an hour ago. She'd said she was heading to bed, complaining that the pillows were cold without me there. Her voice on the phone was soft and sweet, just like her. But the woman in front of me was poured into a black, skin-tight dress that showcased curves I'd only ever glimpsed in shadow. Her hair was styled in glamorous waves that cascaded over her shoulders. She was turned to the side, talking to a man in a bespoke suit, her shoulders shaking with laughter. I knew that laugh. I knew that profile. I know that person if she were reduced to ash. Her arm was looped through the man's, her long fingers tipped with blood-red nails. Clara never wore colors that loud. She was a teacher. She'd always said it wasn't professional. She never wore dresses that revealing, either. She was self-conscious about her legs, always opting for long pants or skirts that fell below the knee. But that face, that was her face. My mind went blank, a roaring static filling my ears. Blood rushed to my head, but my hands and feet were ice cold. On instinct, I ducked behind one of the massive support columns in the lobby, my eyes glued to them. The man looked to be in his late 30s, a gold watch on his wrist, his hair slicked back. He leaned in and whispered something in her ear, and her laughter grew brighter. She playfully tapped him on chest. That single tap felt like a sledgehammer to my own heart. I pulled out my phone, my fingers trembling so badly I could barely hit the right keys. I dialed Claire's number. I told myself, the second her phone rings, I'm storming out there. I'll confront her in front of everyone and demand to know what the hell is going on. I'll watch her try to explain this. The lobby was quiet except for the low thrum of ambient music. I watched the woman, the Clara, and saw no sign of a phone ringing in her clutch. She was still smiling, still talking to the man. The call connected. Hey, Han. It was my wife's voice. Claire's voice, tinged with a sleepy, nasal tone, lazy and warm. You were asleep. I heard my own voice, as dry and rough as sandpaper. You woke me up. What's wrong? Miss me already? She chuckled softly on the other end. I stared, transfixed, at the woman beyond the column. She happened to turn her head, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and raising it to the man. Under the recessed lighting, her face was dazzling, radiant. Identical. The same face as the gentle, caring Clara on the phone. It's nothing, I said, the words practically torn from my throat. Just wanted to hear your voice. Go back to sleep. Okay. You get some rest, too. Don't work too late. She hung up. I watched the two of them walk to the elevators, the man's arm wrapped securely around her waist. It was an intimate gesture. The elevator doors closed, and the floor numbers began to climb. Floor 16. I glanced down at my own room key. Floor 17. The rage was gone. All I felt was a chilling, bone-deep sense of the absurd. I didn't go back to my room. I sat on a lobby sofa all night, my mind split in two. There were two Claras. One who had just wished me good night over the phone, and one who was being held by another man in an elevator. Which one was real? Or were they both real? When the sun came up, I called my boss and told him there'd been an unexpected complication with the deal, and I'd need to stay a few more days. Then I checked out of my room on the 17th floor. Using a different credit card, I booked a new room on the 16th, right next door to theirs. I had to see for myself. I had to know just how many secrets the woman I slept next to every night was keeping from me. Room 1608. That was the room they'd entered last night. My new room was 1607, sharing a wall. The hotel was well built. When I pressed my ear against the wall, I heard nothing. I'm no spy, but I've seen movies. I Googled simple listening devices and ordered one off Amazon with same-day delivery. 2 hours later, a discreet little black box was in my hands. I locked myself in 1607 and drew the curtains, plunging the room into darkness. The only light came from my phone screen, illuminating my pale, drawn face. I got to work. I affixed a bug to the shared wall, the wire leading to an earbud. The world went quiet, replaced by the massively amplified, minuscule sounds from the next room. I heard running water, the shower. Someone was bathing. My heart started to race. Was it her? Clara? My mind involuntarily pictured her showering at home, the air thick with steam, humming slightly off-key. The water in the earpiece stopped. Then, the buzz of a hairdryer. It was all so normal, so domestic. But behind this veneer of normalcy was a knife, poised to drive straight into my heart. The hairdryer cut off. A man's voice, slightly muffled, spoke up. "Baby, we're that white one I bought you." My fists clenched. A woman's voice, laced with amusement. All right, you and your little games." It was Clara's voice. I would never mistake it. I had shared a bed with the owner of that voice for 3 years. I knew every rise and fall of her inflection, but the words she spoke were like needles in my ears. I heard the rustle of fabric, the click of heels on the floor. Then the hotel room, door opened and closed. They were gone. I ripped the earbud out and scrambled to the peephole. Down the hall, the man had his arm around Clara, who was now wearing a white dress, not yesterday's black one. They walked toward the elevator, looking very much like a couple. I watched them disappear, feeling the strength drain from my body. I collapsed onto the carpet, my thoughts a tangled mess. Who was she? If she wasn't Clara, how could there be someone in the world who looked and sounded exactly like her? And if she was Clara, then who was the woman who called me every day, waiting for me at home? A ghost. I picked up my phone and dialed Clara's number again. She answered almost immediately. "Hon, are you still tied up with work stuff?" Her voice was perfectly normal, even a little cheerful. "Yeah, almost done," I said, forcing my own voice to remain steady. "What? What are you up to?" "I'm deep cleaning the house, and I'm exhausted. You have no idea how much dust builds up under the sofa when you're not here." She grumbled playfully, and I could hear the faint whine of the vacuum cleaner in the background. "Oh yeah? Sorry to make you work so hard. It's no trouble. I want the house to be sparkling clean for when you get back. It'll put you in a good mood. Oh, I made your favorite pot roast today. Too bad you can't have any. Want me to send you a picture?" "Sure." A moment later, a picture popped up in my messages. It was our kitchen. A Dutch oven sat on the stove, steam rising from it. Clara was wearing one of our matching blue aprons, making a peace sign at the camera. Her hair was pulled back casually, her face free of makeup. It was the face I knew best. In the background were the tiles we'd picked out together, the kitschy souvenir magnet my mom bought us hanging on the wall. Everything checked out. But just a few minutes ago, I had heard with my own ears and seen with my own eyes another her walk out of a hotel room in a sexy dress, wrapped in another man's arms. I looked at the smiling Clara on my phone, then thought of the cool, elegant silhouette I'd seen through the peephole. An idea, venomous and slick, slithered into my mind. It wasn't a doppelganger. What if my wife was living a double life? At home, she was the devoted teacher, the gentle wife. But out here, she was someone else entirely. A woman I didn't know at all. The thought made my blood run cold. I had always believed there were no secrets between us. We'd met in college, dated for 4 years, been married for 3. 7 years of what I thought was a rock-solid relationship. I thought I knew everything about her. I knew she loved sweets and hated spicy food. I knew she had to hug a pillow to fall asleep, a symptom of her mild anxiety. I knew about the tiny, hidden mole in her left eyebrow. But now, I realized I might not know her at all. I couldn't just wait anymore. The bug only gave me sound. I needed visuals. I needed proof. I picked up my phone again and started searching for miniature spy cams. I had to know who the woman in 1608 really was. And if she really was Clara, I was going to make sure she had nothing left to say when I presented her with the ruins of our marriage. I didn't buy the camera. It was too risky. If I got caught, I wouldn't just lose my chance at getting evidence. I'd turn myself into some kind of criminal pervert. I had to change tactics. I had to go on the offensive. I spent a day digging into the man's background. His name was Reed, the CEO of a local publicly traded company. It wasn't hard to find out. His business card was available at the hotel's business center. I also learned he had a business dinner that night at the Elysian, a high-end lounge on the Strip. I didn't know if Clara would be there, but I was willing to bet on it. At 7 that evening, I changed my look. Not my usual plaid work shirt, but the most expensive suit in my closet, the one I bought for our wedding. I worked some product into my hair. I looked presentable. I got to the Elysian early and got a table in a VIP section not far from Reed's reserved suite. Then I waited. Around 8, Reed and his entourage of business associates arrived. I kept my eyes on the entrance, my heart pounding. 5 minutes later, she appeared. It was Clara again. Tonight she wore a stunning royal blue dress with a dangerously high slit that offered glimpses of a long leg as she walked. Her makeup was flawless, giving her an air of cold, captivating glamour. She didn't go in with Reed, but stood at the door of the suite, giving instructions to a man who looked like the manager. He was utterly deferential to her. She wasn't just a guest. She seemed to be in charge. I took a deep breath, left my table, and walked out into the main corridor. I pretended to be passing by, walking right past her. She wore a faint perfume, something woody and sharp, not the sweet, floral scent Clara favored. It was a scent with an edge, assertive. I walked to the end of the hall and flagged down a server. I slipped him $100 bill. "Hey man, do me a favor. See that woman in the blue dress?" I gestured in her direction. The server glanced over and nodded. "I'd like to buy her a drink. Tell her Mr. Grant and Suite A8 would like to see her." I gave myself a new identity on the spot. The server hesitated, looked down at the bill, and tucked it into his pocket. "I could try, sir, but that's Ivy. She's the VIP manager. She doesn't usually sit with guests." Ivy? Her name wasn't Clara? My heart hammered against my ribs. I went back to Suite A8 and poured myself a glass of whiskey, downing it in one go. The liquor burned my throat, but my mind was clearer than ever. 5 minutes later, there was a knock on the door. "Come in," I said. The door opened as she walked in. It was really her. She paused when she saw I was alone, but her professional smile snapped back into place instantly. "Mr. Grant? I was told you were looking for me." Her voice was identical to Clara's, but her tone was completely different. Clara's voice was soft. Hers was firm, carrying a businesslike distance. I stared at her face. In the dim lighting of the suite, her features seemed even more defined. I could almost see the fine hairs on her skin. It was uncanny. If I didn't know there was another one at home, I would have sworn she was Clara. "Ms. Ivy, is it?" I asked, my voice a bit hoarse. "That's right." She nodded, perching on the edge of the sofa opposite me, a posture that said she was ready to leave at a moment's notice. "Please sit." I gestured to the spot next to me. "Don't be so formal. I'm not going to bite. It's just, you look remarkably like a friend of mine. I want to buy you a drink, get to know you." I pushed a freshly poured glass toward her. She smiled but didn't touch the glass. "You're too kind, Mr. Grant. But we have a rule here. No drinking on the job. If there's nothing else, I'll leave you to enjoy your evening." She started to stand. "Wait," I said. My gaze fell to her bare left ankle. There, small and delicate, was a butterfly tattoo. Clara didn't have any tattoos. Her skin was too sensitive. She didn't even have pierced ears. My world was tilting on its axis, but my face had to remain a mask of calm. "Ivy," I said, changing the subject. "A friend told me the service here is top-notch. I'm hosting some important clients in a few days and was hoping to book your best suite." The lie felt flimsy even to me, but she seemed to buy it. She settled back onto the sofa and pulled a small notebook and a pen from her clutch. "Of course, Mr. Grant. How many people in your party? Do you have any specific requests for drinks or food?" She shifted into work mode, all professional competence. I watched her jotting down notes, her focused expression overlapping with the way Clara looked when she was preparing her lesson plans. "By the way," I asked, feigning casualness, "you don't sound like you're from Vegas." Her pen paused. She looked up at me, her gaze sharp, analytical. "Are you curious about me, Mr. Grant?" "Just making conversation." I raised my glass to hide my nervousness. "I'm not from around here, either. Always nice to meet someone else from out of town." She seemed to relax her guard. A small smile played on her lips. "I don't have a hometown." "What do you mean?" "I grew up in an orphanage," she said, her tone matter-of-fact, as if discussing something that had happened to someone else. "Wherever I am is home." An orphanage? Those 3 words were like a bolt of lightning, cutting through the fog of my confusion. Clara also grew up in an orphanage. She told me her parents died in an accident when she was very young. She'd stayed in the system until she was 18, when she'd gotten into college and left. Could it be? A wild, impossible theory began to form in my mind. I looked at this woman named Ivy, at her face identical to Clara's, at the unfamiliar butterfly on her ankle. I decided to raise the stakes. If you don't mind my asking, which orphanage was it? For the first time, her expression changed. Her eyes went cold, freezing over like a winter lake. Mr. Grant, you're asking too many questions. She snapped her notebook shut and stood up, the professional smile gone. I'll make sure the suite is arranged. If there's nothing else, I'll be on my way. She turned and left without a hint of hesitation. I watched her go, the royal blue dress a flash of cool light, disappearing through the door. The suite was silent again, the air still holding the faint, sharp scent of her perfume. I collapsed onto the sofa, her words echoing in my mind. I grew up in an orphanage. This couldn't be a coincidence. The same face, the same voice, and both orphans. The world didn't work that way. I started frantically replaying everything I knew about Clara. She'd mentioned the orphanage, but never went into detail. She'd only said life there was hard, and she didn't like to talk about it. I respected that and never pushed. She told me she was an only child, that her parents were gone. She told me that herself. Was she lying? Or was it possible that even she didn't know? I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through pictures of Clara. One after another. Us at the beach, her in a white sundress, smiling like a kid. Us at my parents' house, her helping my mom make dumplings, a smudge of flour on her nose. The day we got our marriage license, her holding up the certificate in front of City Hall, her eyes shining. In every photo, she was so real, so warm. Her eyes crinkled when she smiled. I zoomed in on a formal portrait we'd taken. There it was, in her left eyebrow, the tiny mole. You'd never notice it if you weren't looking for it. I closed my eyes, tried to picture the woman named Ivy. I reconstructed her face in my mind. Did she have the mole? I couldn't remember. The lighting in the lounge had been too dim. I had been so fixated on her face and the tattoo on her ankle that I'd completely missed the most important detail. I had to see her again. I had to confirm it. The next day, I didn't go back to the lounge. That would be too obvious. I staked out the hotel. I blended in, setting up my laptop at a table in the lobby cafe, pretending to work. I was waiting for her and Mr. Reed to appear. Around 6 in the evening, they came down. Today, she was in a sharp, black pantsuit, her hair pulled back in a sleek bun that exposed the elegant line of her neck. She walked beside Reed, but a half step behind, looking less like a lover and more like a high-powered executive assistant. They headed toward the hotel restaurant. I immediately got up and followed. The restaurant was an open-plan space. I found a corner table with a clear view of them. I ordered a steak I had no intention of eating. My entire focus was on the woman's face. The distance was too great, the lighting too ambient. I couldn't see clearly. My palms started to sweat. I had to get closer. Steeling myself, I picked up my wine glass and walked toward their table. Mr. Reed, I said, feigning delighted surprise. What a coincidence. Reed, who was in the middle of cutting his steak, looked up, a blank expression on his face. He clearly had no idea who I was. And you are? Oh, you have so many people to keep track of, I understand. Ethan Grant, from Apex Solutions. We met at the Franklin conference last year. I started talking nonsense. A guy like him meets 100 people a day at those things. He'd never remember them all. Sure enough, a flicker of vague recognition crossed his face. He stood up. Oh, right. Mr. Grant, good to see you again. We shook hands. This was my chance. My eyes moved naturally to the woman sitting across from him. She stood as well, giving me a polite nod. This time I saw it. I saw it perfectly. Her face was flawless. Her left eyebrow was clean, smooth, without a single blemish. No mole. The little secret between Clara and me, the mark I used to tease her about, calling it her beauty mark, it wasn't there. My heart dropped back into place, but the relief was immediately replaced by an even greater confusion. She wasn't Clara, but who was she? And this is... I asked, looking at her, playing dumb. This is my executive assistant, Ivy Chun, Reed said. Ivy Chun. Not just Ivy. And her last name was Chun. My mind raced. Clara Chun. Ivy Chun. An orphanage. The same face, the same last name. A staggering idea became clearer, more real. Twins. They were twins. My breathing grew shallow. If it was true, it explained everything. Why they looked and sounded alike. Why one was a general schoolteacher and the other was a cool, sharp-tongued professional. Why one had smooth skin and the other a butterfly tattoo. Why one had a mole and the other didn't. But if they were twins, why had Clara never mentioned it? Did she not know she had a sister? Or was she hiding it? If it was the former, what happened at that orphanage 20 years ago that could separate two twin sisters so completely that they were unaware of each other's existence? If it was the latter, Clara, my wife, what was her reason for hiding something so monumental. I looked at the woman before me, Ivy Chun. She was smiling politely, but her eyes held a hint of suspicion. She was probably wondering why this Mr. Grant she'd met once was staring at her so intently. I had to calm down. This was far more complicated than I'd ever imagined. This wasn't a simple case of infidelity anymore. This was about a 20-year-old secret, about the hidden pasts of two women. And I, an outsider, had stumbled into the role of the one person who could unravel it all. I decided then and there I had to keep digging, not just for my marriage anymore, but for Clara and for this woman, Ivy Chun. I had to know what happened back then. I didn't tip my hand to Ivy. After a few more minutes of pleasantries with Mr. Reed, I made my excuses and left the restaurant. Back in my room, the first thing I did was call Clara. This time, my goal wasn't to test her, but to find a clue. Hey, Han, quick question for you. I kept my tone casual. What is it? Do you happen to remember the name of the orphanage you stayed at? I said the word orphanage slowly, listening for any hesitation in her response. The line went silent for a few seconds. Why are you suddenly asking about that? Her voice was wary. No reason, really. I just met a client today who mentioned he also grew up in one. He was saying they had a kid who became valedictorian and did really well for himself. It made me think of you, since you were top of your class, too. Just wondered if it was the same place. I spun a lie I thought was seamless. Oh, I see. She seemed to accept it. The place I was at. It's long gone. They tore it down more than 20 years ago. It was called Sunbeam. Sunbeam Children's Home. Sunbeam Children's Home. I committed the name to memory. Tore it down? That's a shame. It was a long time ago, she said, her voice dropping a little. Han, can we not talk about this? I don't like to think about it. Okay, sure. We won't talk about it. I backed off immediately. Pushing any further would make her suspicious. After hanging up, I immediately started searching online for Sunbeam Children's Home. There wasn't much. This was pre-internet, after all. After scrolling through pages of irrelevant results, I found a post in the corner of an old local history subreddit. It was a nostalgia thread, and someone had mentioned the home. The post said that due to city redevelopment, the orphanage was demolished around 1998, and the children were sent to various other facilities in the city. There were only a few replies. One of them caught my eye. It was from a user named Kaitrunner78. He said he still had some old photos from the home. I quickly created a Reddit account and sent him a direct message. I told him a family member of mine had been at Sunbeam and that I'd love to see the photos just to have a piece of her past. I waited all night. The next morning, I finally got a reply. Sure, send me an email address and I'll forward them. I sent him my burner email. 30 minutes later, a new message arrived. Attached were a dozen scanned, black and white photos. They were yellowed and grainy, but you could still make out a simple courtyard filled with kids in ill-fitting clothes, their faces bright with smiles. I zoomed in on each photo, studying every face. In the third picture, I found her. Clara. She couldn't have been more than 7 or 8, her hair in 2 pigtails, standing in a group of children. She was smiling shyly at the camera. I recognized her instantly, and then my gaze froze. Standing right next to her was another little girl. Same pigtails, same face, even the same timid smile. The only difference was that this girl's brow was clear. But Clara, I could just make out a tiny dark spot right where her mole was. It was them, Clara and Ivy. They really were twin sisters, and they had lived together at the same orphanage as children. So why would Clara tell me she was an only child? And why would Ivy say she didn't have a home? What on earth happened at that orphanage? Why were they separated? And why were they both either unaware of or completely silent about the other's existence? I stared at the 2 little girls huddled together in the photograph, a heavy weight settling in my chest. This picture proved Clara had lied to me. That realization hurt more than the suspicion of her cheating. Cheating would have been a betrayal of our love. This was a betrayal of the fundamental trust between us. I saved the photo. I needed an explanation, but I couldn't just confront Clara with it. That would be admitting I'd been investigating her. Our marriage would be over in an instant. And I couldn't ask Ivy. She was already wary of me, a stranger. I had no right to pry into her past. I needed a way in, someone who could give me the right to put this picture in front of them. My eyes went back to the Reddit thread, to the username, Kaitrunner78. He had the old photos. He must have had a strong connection to the place. Maybe he knew what had happened back then. I decided I had to find him. I messaged him again. Thank you so much for the photos. I saw my relative in them, and I also saw a girl who looks exactly like her. This is incredibly important to me. I don't mean to pry, but were you a teacher or a staff member at the home? I was hoping to ask you a few questions. This time, the reply came quickly. No, I was one of the kids. I was adopted. Do you remember the twin sisters in the photo? I typed, my heart pounding. He was silent for a long time, so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, a new message popped up on the screen. I remember them. Of course I do. One was named Clara, the other was Ivy. Clara got adopted. Ivy was left behind. Clara and Ivy. One adopted, one left behind. Just a few words, but the weight of them was immense. My heart sank. Why did they only adopt one? I typed back, my fingers flying. They were twins. Why would anyone separate them? Kytrainer78 replied. The family was wealthy, but they only wanted one child. They chose Clara because she was quieter and she had that little mole on her brow. They thought it was a beauty mark, a sign of good fortune. A beauty mark. I gripped my phone, my knuckles white. Because of a tiny mole, because of some stupid, superficial reason, a pair of twin sisters were torn apart? What kind of twisted logic was that? What happened to Ivy? The day they took Clara, Ivy cried her eyes out. She ran after the car for a long time, fell, and scraped her knee. After that, she changed. She stopped talking, stopped smiling. Later, when the orphanage was demolished, us older kids were all sent to different places. I was adopted soon after that, and I lost touch with her. I stared at the words on the screen, the scene playing out in my mind. One little girl, quiet and sweet, being led away by a rich couple into a fancy car toward a new life. The other girl, in worn-out hand-me-downs, chasing after them, crying, falling in the dust as she watched her other half disappear down the road. From that day on, their lives took completely different paths. Clara, my Clara, was adopted into a good home, got a good education, became a respected teacher, met me, and started a family. Her life was warm and stable. And Ivy, the woman named Ivy Chun, was left behind. She grew up in turmoil, had to fight her way into the world, became a VIP manager at a Vegas lounge, navigating a world of smoke and mirrors. Her eyes held a hardness that I now understood. It was all starting to make sense. Why Clara never mentioned a sister? Maybe her adoptive parents, wanting her to fully assimilate, erased her past. They told her she was their only daughter, that she had no sister named Ivy. Over time, she might have even come to believe it herself. Or maybe she remembered. Maybe it was the deepest scar in her heart, one she couldn't bear to touch or let anyone else see. She was afraid to face the sister she'd abandoned, terrified of the guilt. So she chose to forget, chose to lie. And Ivy, she definitely remembered. The pain of being left behind is something that gets carved into your bones. It's why she said she had no home. It's why she had a butterfly tattooed on her ankle, a creature born to fly away. I shut off my phone and leaned back against the headboard, lighting a cigarette. I'm not the kind of guy who gets involved in other people's business. But this, I felt like I had to see this through. This wasn't about being cheated on anymore, or a crisis of trust. This was about two women whose lives have been twisted by fate for over 20 years. And I, a husband, a stranger who stumbled into the middle of it, was now the only one who knew the whole truth. I had an overwhelming urge to bring them together. I didn't know what would happen when they met. Would they break down and cry? Would they stand in silence? Would it be a moment of forgiveness or one of deeper resentment? I had no idea, but I knew they deserved the chance to meet. They had the right to know that their other half was alive and well, in the same corner of the world. How could I do it? I couldn't just drag Ivy to Clara. The shock would be too much. I needed a catalyst, a natural, subtle opportunity for their paths to cross. Countless ideas flashed through my mind, each one dismissed. Then my eyes landed on the hotel's promotional brochure on the nightstand. It featured a glossy photo of Mr. Reed's face. He was one of the hotel's primary investors, and Ivy was his assistant. That meant she was here at this hotel all the time. A bold plan began to form in my mind. I picked up my phone and sent a text to Clara. Hey, hon, great news. The deal is done, and the client was so happy they've offered to pay for the whole team to stay and relax in Vegas for a couple of days. Company's covering everything. You've always wanted a proper Vegas trip, right? Pack a bag and come out tomorrow. I gave her an excuse, an offer she couldn't refuse. I was going to lure her here, to this city, to this very hotel. I was going to make these two sisters, separated for 20 years, meet again. Clara arrived sooner than I expected. The next afternoon, she appeared in the hotel lobby, pulling a small suitcase behind her. She wore a pale yellow sundress, her face bright with excitement. The moment she saw me, she practically ran into my arms, giving me a huge hug. I missed you so much, she said. Her voice, her embrace, her scent, it was all so familiar. I held her, a cocktail of emotions swirling inside me. Guilt, because I was deceiving her. Pity, because I knew what she was about to face. And a sliver of anticipation that I didn't want to admit to myself. I missed you too, I said, patting her back. Come on, let's get you to the room. I'd booked her a room on the 18th floor. I didn't want her on the same floor as Ivy. That was cutting it too close. After getting Clara settled, I made up an excuse about a quick follow-up meeting with the client and slipped out. I went straight to the 16th floor. I needed to know Ivy's schedule for the day. I didn't bother with the listening device again. This time, I went directly to the lounge. I was Mr. Grant, a potential major client. I had a legitimate reason to speak with the VIP manager. Sure enough, I found her in her office. She was on the phone, a slight frown on her face, seemingly dealing with a problem. When she saw me, she gave a small nod, holding up a finger to ask me to wait. I sat on the sofa and glanced around her office. It was small but immaculate. A picture frame sat on her desk, its back to me. She finished her call quickly, a hint of weariness in her voice. Mr. Grant, I'm sorry to keep you waiting. No problem, I said with a wave. I was just coming by to confirm the details for the suite. Also, my wife arrived today, and I was hoping to book a nice table at the hotel steakhouse. I was wondering if you could help with that. I mentioned my wife on purpose. I wanted to see her reaction. Her expression didn't flicker. She just gave a professional nod. Of course. What time would you like the reservation? 7 o'clock. A table by the window, if possible. Consider it done. I'll make the arrangements now. She picked up the phone and handled it with brisk efficiency. It all went so smoothly. She showed no unusual reaction to me or to the mention of my wife. Maybe she truly didn't care anymore. Maybe she had grown accustomed to a life without family. The thought left a sour taste in my mouth. At 7 o'clock, I escorted Clara to the steakhouse. I had specifically chosen a table that was near the entrance, but still felt private. Clara was ecstatic, like a bird let out of its cage, fascinated by everything. This place is beautiful, she whispered. Only the best for you. I started cutting her steak, but my mind was on the clock. Would Ivy show up? Based on her work ethic, she would likely do a walkthrough of the restaurant around this time. My palms were sweating. At 7:30, a familiar figure appeared at the entrance. It was Ivy. She was in her work uniform, a walkie-talkie in hand, speaking to the hostess. My heart leaped into my throat. Clara was focused on her dessert, oblivious to the entrance. After finishing her instructions, Ivy habitually scanned the dining room. Her gaze swept over the crowd, and then it landed on our table. And then she froze. Her body went rigid. The walkie-talkie nearly slipped from her grasp. Her eyes were locked on Clara's face, filled with a look of pure shock, of disbelief, and a storm of other emotions I couldn't begin to decipher. As if sensing something, Clara looked up. She followed my gaze toward the entrance. The next second, her expression mirrored Ivy's. The fork in her hand clattered onto her plate with a sharp clink. Her mouth fell slightly open, her eyes wide, as if she were seeing a ghost. Time seemed to stop. The restaurant was full of life, clinking glasses, murmured conversations, but it all faded into a blurry, silent backdrop. In my world, there were only these two women. They stared at each other from across the room, one in a gentle, pale yellow dress, the other in a sharp, black suit. One whose face was a canvas of pure, bewildered shock. The other whose shock was being rapidly consumed by a wave of pain and resentment. It was like looking in a mirror, one side reflecting heaven, the other hell. I could feel Clara's body start to tremble. Ethan, she grabbed my hand, her voice shaking. That person, she couldn't form a complete sentence. I knew she recognized her. There was no way she couldn't. At the entrance, Ivy's shock hardened into a cold mask. She tore her gaze away, as if what she'd seen was just a trick of the light. She turned and walked away briskly, her departure as sharp and final as the cut of a knife. The restaurant's ambience returned to normal, but Clara was in a state of utter disarray. Who is she? Who was that? She kept asking, her eyes wild with fear. I squeezed her hand, which was now ice cold and slick with sweat. It's okay, I said. I don't know. Probably. Just someone who looks like you. I told a lie that I didn't even believe myself. The timing wasn't right. I couldn't tell her the truth now. It would completely destroy her. I helped her up, and we left the restaurant. Back in our room, she was like a ghost, curling up on the sofa and staring into space, completely silent. I knew that neither of us would be sleeping tonight. The mirror had appeared. On one side was Clara, on the other Ivy, and I was standing right in the middle, knowing it was about to shatter. Clara didn't sleep a wink. She stayed curled on the sofa, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. I brought her a glass of warm water, but she didn't touch it. I knew that single glance in the restaurant had shattered her peaceful world. Ethan, she finally spoke as dawn approached, her voice raw. Do you think? Is it possible for two people to look exactly alike? Maybe, I said, sitting beside her and pulling her into my arms. It's a big world. She rested her head on my shoulder, still trembling. but I feel like I've seen her before, somewhere. My heart tightened. Really? Where? I don't know. She shook her head, lost. It's just a feeling. So familiar, but so terrifying. She remembered. On some subconscious level, she still held the image of that little girl chasing a car. But the memory was buried deep, locked away. Ivy's appearance was the key, starting to pry open that rusty lock. I said nothing more, just held her. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't let her spiral like this. I needed the truth. A truth that everyone involved could finally face. The next day, I told Clara to rest at the hotel while I went out. My destination was the Clark County Records Archive. Sunbeam Children's home might be gone, but its official records would have been transferred somewhere. I was looking for Clara's adoption file from 20 years ago. Maybe it held a clue about Ivy. The archive was quiet. I explained to the clerk that I was researching a family member's adoption history. She was professional, informing me that records that old required a formal request. I filled out the form, lying that I was Clara's brother and providing her information. Then came the long wait. The entire afternoon ticked by. Just before closing time, the clerk finally returned with a thick, yellowed file folder. Found it, she said. Adoption records for Sunbeam Children's Home, 1998. My heart was in my throat. I put on a pair of white gloves and carefully opened the file. The paper was brittle, the ink faded. I scanned page after page. Finally, I found it. Adoptee, Clara Chun. Age 8. Adoptive parents, David and Sarah Miller. Home address, David and Sarah Miller. Those were the names of the people Clara called Mom and Dad. I read on. In the notes section, I saw a line of handwritten text. The ink so faded it was barely legible. Subject has an identical twin sister, Ivy Chun. Per the wishes of the adoptive family, sister was not adopted. Ivy Chun has been transferred to the county's second youth facility. At the bottom was a red stamp, too blurry to make out. This was it, the second youth facility. That's where Ivy went. I was so excited I nearly shouted. I quickly took a picture of the document with my phone. This was ironclad proof. I took the address and rushed to the location of the former facility. But my hopes were dashed. The address now belonged to a new condo development. I asked a security guard, who told me the youth facility had moved to the suburbs a decade ago. Without wasting a moment, I drove out to the suburbs. By the time it got dark, I finally found the new facility. It was a large, modern campus, a world away from the grim image I had of the old Sunbeam home. I found the director's office. A kind-faced woman in her 50s greeted me. I showed her the photo of the file on my phone and explained the situation. The director listened to my story, her expression somber. After a long silence, she sighed, took a key from her desk, and unlocked an old metal filing cabinet. After a moment of searching, she pulled out an equally old file. Ivy Chun, she said softly, reading the name on the tab. I remember this child. What was she like? I asked urgently. She was a very headstrong girl, the director said. When she first arrived from Sunbeam, she wouldn't speak to anyone. She just shut herself away. We were all worried she wouldn't make it. A knot formed in my stomach. What happened then? She pulled herself out of it. She started studying relentlessly, took on every part-time job she could find. By the time she was 16, she was earning her own money and moved out. She said she didn't want to depend on anyone ever again. Did she go to college? The director shook her head. No, she said she didn't have time. She had to make money. My throat felt tight. Clara went to college and became a respected teacher. Ivy, to survive, had to give up her education. The same starting line, two completely different races. Did she know she had a sister? I asked the most important question. Yes, the director nodded, her eyes full of sympathy. She always knew. She told me she was going to make something of herself, and then she would go find her sister. She didn't want her sister to see her when she was struggling. She also said she didn't hate her sister. She hated the couple who only took one of them, and she hated herself for not being strong enough to stop them from taking her away. The director's voice was quiet, but every word landed like a hammer blow. Ivy remembered everything. She remembered Clara, the day they were separated, all the pain and injustice. She hadn't forgotten or grown to resent her. She was just trying to survive, trying to build a life worthy of the sister who was taken from her. The cold, sharp woman from the lounge, the one who moved so confidently at Mr. Reed's side, was carrying a wound that deep, a tenderness that fierce. It was completely dark when I left the facility. I looked up at the stars and made a decision. I couldn't wait any longer. I couldn't let them torture themselves and each other from a distance. I had to bring them face to face, and I had to tell them the whole, unvarnished truth of what happened all those years ago. When I got back to the hotel, Clara was still on the sofa, in the same position as the night before. The room was dark, the city lights painting shifting patterns on her face. "Ethan, you're back," she said, her voice hollow. I walked over, knelt in front of her, and took her cold hands in mine. "Clara," I said, looking her straight in the eye. "We need to talk." I turned on every light in the suite. Then I took out my laptop, placed it on the coffee table, and opened it. On the screen was the adoption record from the archive and the old black-and-white photo from Sunbeam Children's Home. In the photo, two identical little girls stood side by side. Clara's gaze fell to the screen. When she registered what she was seeing, her entire body jolted. She stared at the photo, at the little girl who was her mirror image but for the mole, and her lips began to tremble. Tears, huge and silent, streamed down her face. It wasn't a loud sob, but a quiet, hopeless weeping. 20 years of repressed emotion bursting forth. "It's her," she whispered, her trembling hand pointing at the other girl in the photo. "It's Ivy, my sister." She remembered. She really remembered. The memory hadn't vanished. It had just been locked away. "Why? Why did you lie to me?" I asked, my own voice breaking with the pain of it all. "Why didn't you ever tell me you had a twin sister?" She covered her face, her cries now ragged and broken. "I didn't know. I didn't know how to say it. Mom and Dad, my adoptive parents, they wouldn't let me talk about her. They said from now on, I was their only daughter. I didn't have a sister. I only had one family. I was so little, and I was so scared. I was terrified that if I mentioned Ivy, they would send me back. I didn't want to go back to being cold and hungry. I didn't want to." She could barely breathe through her sobs. "Later, when I was older, I tried to find her, but the orphanage was gone. I couldn't find her anywhere. I thought I'd never see her again. I was afraid to tell you," she confessed. "I was afraid you'd look down on me, knowing I had a sister out there who I knew nothing about. I was afraid you'd think I was a terrible person for abandoning her to have a better life. I'm sorry, Ethan. I'm so sorry." I pulled her into a tight embrace. So this was the secret she'd been carrying. It wasn't a lack of love or longing. It was fear, shame, and a crushing sense of guilt. She'd been burying her head in the sand, hoping that if she didn't look, it would cease to exist. "You fool," I whispered, stroking her hair, my own throat thick with emotion. "I would never look down on you. I would only love you more for what you've been through." We held each other and cried for a long time. When her emotions finally subsided, I told her everything. Everything I'd done in Vegas. I told her about Ivy, her job, and what the director at the youth facility had told me. "She doesn't hate you," I said. "She just wanted to make something of herself before she came to find you." Clara's tears started again, but this time, her eyes weren't filled with fear. They were filled with resolve. "I have to see her," she said. "Ethan, take me to her. Right now." I knew this moment had to come. I called Ivy, using my Mr. Grant identity. "Ivy, something urgent has come up. I need to speak with you in person. I'm in room 1809 at the Hilton. Can you come over now?" There was a pause on the other end. "Fine." 30 minutes later, the doorbell rang. Clara gripped my arm, her palms slick with sweat. I walked to the door and opened it. Ivy stood there. She'd changed out of her work clothes and was wearing a simple white t-shirt and jeans. The butterfly tattoo on her ankle was visible. She saw me. Then her eyes moved past me to Clara. Her pupils constricted. Her first instinct was to turn and run. "Ivy." Clara rushed forward and grabbed her hand. It was the first time they had touched in 20 years. Ivy's body went stiff as a board. She looked at Clara, then at me, her eyes flashing with anger and betrayal. "This was your doing?" she said to me, her voice cold as ice. "Ivy, it's not his fault," Clara cried. "It was me. I had to see you. Sister, it's me. I'm your sister. Don't call me that." Ivy yanked her hand away, her voice sharp. "I don't have a sister." She turned and bolted down the hall. Clara tried to follow, but her legs gave out, and she nearly collapsed. I caught her, then yelled at Ivy's retreating back. "Don't you want to know what really happened? Don't you want to know why you were the one left behind?" Ivy stopped at the end of the hall. She didn't turn around, but I could see her shoulders trembling. I angled my laptop, so the screen was visible from the doorway. "Look at this," I said. Slowly, painfully, Ivy turned. Her gaze fell on the black and white photograph. It fell on the official record, on the words, "Per the wishes of the adoptive family, sister was not adopted." And then this woman, who had built a fortress around herself, who moved through the world like a warrior, who said she had no home. She crumpled to the floor of the hallway and began to sob like a child. The sound was filled with 20 years of pain, of injustice, of longing. It echoed down the entire 18th floor. Ivy cried for a long time, her heartbreaking sobs slowly turning into quiet, ragged gasps. Clara stood in the doorway, watching her, tears streaming down her own face, but she didn't dare go closer. A wall of 2 decades stood between them. I stepped into the hall and helped Ivy to her feet. "Come inside," I said gently. She didn't resist, letting me guide her into the room. She was trembling, as if she were freezing cold. A heavy silence descended. The three of us were suspended in our own private worlds, none of us knowing what to say. Clara took a hesitant step forward, then retreated. Ivy stared at her own feet, as if trying to burn a hole in the carpet. I sighed and went to put on the kettle. "Here," I said, handing each of them a mug of hot tea. "Drink this." Clara took hers, her hands wrapped around the mug, as if trying to draw strength from its warmth. Ivy didn't move. "Ivy," Clara finally found her voice. "I'm sorry." Ivy's shoulders trembled, but she didn't look up. "I'm sorry," Clara repeated, her voice choked with tears. "Back then, I didn't mean to leave you." Her voice broke. "I was just a kid. I was scared. I swear I didn't know they were only taking me." And later, Ivy finally spoke, her voice raspy, raw. "When you grew up, why didn't you come find me?" The question was a knife, twisting in Clara's heart. The color drained from her face. I tried," she explained desperately. "I ran away and went back to the orphanage, but it was gone. It had been demolished. I asked everyone, but no one knew where you all went. Then my parents found out. They locked me in the house. They told me. They said the world was dangerous, and if I ever ran off again, they'd send me back." She was rambling, the words tumbling out between sobs. "I know I was a coward. I was selfish. I loved the warmth of that home, and I was terrified of going back to the way things were. So I chose to forget. I thought if I just didn't think about it, it would be like you didn't exist. Then I could live my nice, comfortable life without guilt. I'm sorry. Ivy, I'm so sorry." Clara couldn't speak anymore, collapsing to the floor in a heap of misery. Ivy finally looked up. She looked at Clara, who was curled on the floor, crying like a lost child. Her expression was still a tangled mess of pain and resentment, but the icy wall around her seemed to be cracking. She reached out a hand as if to help her up, then pulled it back. She turned to me. "You found all this out?" I nodded. "Why would you get involved?" "Because," I said, meeting her gaze, "I'm her husband. Her business is my business." Ivy's eyes lingered on my face for a long moment. Then she picked up the mug from the table and took a sip. The tea was lukewarm now. She set the mug down and stood up. "I understand," she said. And with that, she turned to leave. "Ivy," Clara scrambled to her feet. Ivy paused at the door, her back still to us. "I need time," she said. Then she opened the door and walked out, closing it gently behind her. The room was quiet again. Clara stared at the closed door, her eyes filled with despair. She won't forgive me." "She will," I said, pulling her into a hug. "She just needs time to process everything. You can't heal a 20-year-old wound with a cup of tea." Clara buried her face in my chest and nodded. I knew this wasn't over, but at least the first step had been taken. The truth was out. The rest was up to time. For the next 2 days, Ivy was a ghost. She didn't answer her phone or reply to texts. Clara was in a deep depression, spending her days staring at the old black and white photo. I stayed by her side, saying little. I knew no words of comfort would help. Honestly, I was worried too. I had no idea what Ivy would choose to do. Disappear forever, or... On the 3rd day, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered it. "Hello, it's me." It was Ivy. Her voice was tired, but much calmer than before. "I'm in a coffee shop downstairs," she said. "Come down." "Alone?" My heart skipped a beat. "Okay." I told Clara I had to take a quick work call. She nodded numbly, not questioning it. I hurried downstairs. I saw Ivy in a corner booth. She wore a simple trench coat, her hair tied back. A cold cup of coffee sat in front of her. She gestured to the seat across from her. I sat down. "Is she okay?" she asked, her gaze fixed on the street outside. "Not really," I said honestly. "She's worried sick about you." Ivy was silent for a long time. "I've been thinking a lot these past few days," she finally said, remembering things. "I remember when we were little, we shared everything. Same bowl of rice, same bed. When it got cold in the winter, we'd just hold each other to stay warm. I remember she was scared of the dark. She wouldn't fall asleep unless she was holding my hand. I remember the day she was adopted. She was wearing a pretty red dress. She looked back and smiled at me, said she'd be back for me soon. She spoke slowly, calmly, as if telling someone else's story, but her eyes were turning red. I waited for her for 20 years. She's upstairs right now, but I don't know how to face her." She finally turned to look at me, her eyes filled with a deep, helpless confusion. "Can you tell me what I'm supposed to do?" In that moment, she wasn't the cool, competent Ivy. She was just a lost kid trying to find her way home. Seeing the raw confusion in Ivy's eyes felt like a punch to the gut. This woman, so tough on the outside, was more fragile than anyone knew. I can't give you that answer, I said, but I can tell you some things you might not know. I told her about my life with Clara over the past few years. I told her how Clara had slowly blossomed from a shy, insecure girl into a confident woman. I told her how we saved up to buy our first small, cozy condo. I told her that Clara became a teacher not for the money, but because she loved children and wanted to give them the warmth she never had. And I told her how, every year, for 1 week, the anniversary of her adoption, Clara would fall into a quiet depression. She would just stare into space, sometimes crying softly when she thought I wasn't looking. I never understood why until now. Ivy listened in silence, not interrupting once. Soft music played in the cafe, but the air between us was heavy. She has a good life, I concluded. Yeah, Ivy said, a bitter smile touching her lips. She does. And she has a terrible life, I added, looking her straight in the eye. No one who carries a secret that big, no one who thinks they lost the most important person in their world, can ever be truly happy. A barely perceptible tremor went through Ivy's body. She picked up her cold coffee and took a sip. Is that all you wanted to tell me? No, I shook my head. I wanted to show you something. I pulled a manila envelope from my briefcase and pushed it across the table. What's this? Open it. Ivy hesitated, then tore open the flap. Inside was a DNA analysis report. I had secretly taken a few of Clara's hairs from her brush and a sample from the rim of a water glass Ivy had used, and I'd paid for a rush-ordered test the day before. Ivy's eyes widened as she read the conclusion. Relationship. The DNA profiles of Sample A, Clara Chun, and Sample B, Ivy Chun, are consistent with those of identical twin sisters. That single line of black text was like a brand, searing itself into the paper and into her heart. The hand holding the report began to shake. She looked up at me, her face a mask of disbelief. When did you? Yesterday, I said. I knew the photos and the files were just evidence of the past. I wanted something undeniable, something that belonged to the present. I don't want your reunion to be built on guilt or pity. I want you both to know, without a shadow of doubt, that you are family. You are connected by blood, irreplaceable to one another in this world. No matter what happened, no matter who you are or what lives you lead now, that fact will never change. Ivy looked down at the report, silent for a long time. I saw a tear fall, then another, landing on the thin paper and spreading into a small, dark stain. Does she? She finally looked up, her voice thick with emotion. Does she know? I shook my head. No, I'm only showing this to you. Why? Because she's the older sister, and you're the younger one, I said. For all these years, you're the one who got the short end of the stick. So the choice should be yours. Whether you reconnect or remain strangers, it's up to you. I was handing her the power to decide. I knew it was a heavy burden, but it was also the only fair way. Ivy stood up, clutching the report. She gave me one last, long, complicated look. Thank you, she said. Then she turned and walked out of the coffee shop, taking the report with her. I watched her go, a sudden hollowness in my chest. I didn't know if I'd done the right thing. I just handed her a bomb. Whether she chose to light the fuse or defuse, it was completely on my hands. I went back to the room. Clara saw me return alone, and a shadow passed over her face, but she didn't say anything. She just came over and gave me a hug. You've worked so hard for this, Ethan. It's okay. I patted her back. That night, we didn't mention Ivy again. We were like fishermen before a hurricane, quietly waiting for the verdict. The next day, we were scheduled to check out and go home. Ivy still hadn't contacted us. Clara's face was a study in concealed disappointment. I knew she was preparing for the worst. We were in the lobby with our bags. I was about to settle the bill. Just then, a figure walked through the main entrance. It was Ivy. She was wearing the same trench coat, but she was hugging a giant teddy bear, one so large it almost obscured her. She walked directly toward us. Clara froze. Ivy stopped right in front of her. She pushed the enormous bear into Clara's arms. You were always scared of the dark, Ivy said, her eyes red, but a small, determined smile fighting its way onto her lips. You needed a bear to sleep. This one's bigger than the old one. From now on, he can keep you company for me. Clara clutched the bear, staring at her sister, and the dam finally broke. Tears poured down her cheeks. Ivy. Sis, Ivy whispered. That one word, sis, traveled across 2 decades and finally reached Clara's ears. Clara couldn't hold back any longer. She dropped the bear, lunged forward, and wrapped her arms around Ivy, holding on for dear life. My sister. My little sister. I'm back, sis. I'm home. In the busy hotel lobby, people stared at the 2 identical women who were clinging to each other and weeping. And I stood beside them, watching them, and smiled. The bizarre, month-long drama that had started with me thinking my wife was cheating had finally, impossibly, found its perfect ending. We didn't go back to California right away. Ivy extended our stay for a few more days. After all these years, she said, "You have to let me play host." As she said it, she and Clara were holding hands, inseparable, as if trying to make up for 20 years of lost time in a matter of hours. Ivy quit her job. She walked away from her position as the VIP manager. She said she was done with the late nights and the fake smiles. I had a word with Mr. Reed. I didn't tell him the whole story, just that Ivy was my wife's long-lost sister and that we were taking her home. Reed just stared, looking from Clara to Ivy and back again, utterly speechless. Finally, he just waved his hand and approved her resignation. "Family first," he muttered. "Family first." For the first time, the three of us sat down for a meal like a family. Not at the fancy hotel steakhouse, but in Ivy's small rental apartment. It was a tiny studio, but she kept it incredibly neat. Clara took over the kitchen, determined to make her famous pot roast. Ivy and I sat on the small sofa in the living room, the silence a little awkward. "So," I started, "what are your plans now?" "I don't know," Ivy said, her eyes soft as she watched Clara bustling in the kitchen. "Take a break for a while. Spend time with her. Are you okay for money?" I asked, getting straight to the point. I knew she didn't have much in savings. Ivy looked at me and smiled, a genuine, relaxed smile. "Don't worry. I won't starve. After the last 20 years, there's not much I can't handle." After a pause, she added, "Ethan, thank you. We're family." "Don't mention it." I waved it off. Dinner was soon ready. A few simple, home-cooked dishes. Clara served Ivy a huge bowl of the pot roast. "Try it," she urged. "It tastes just like you remember from when we were kids." Ivy took a spoonful, and her eyes welled up again. "It's delicious," she said. The meal was slow and quiet. They didn't talk much, but they kept putting food on each other's plates. A conversation carried on through gestures. After dinner, they squeezed onto the little sofa and looked through the old digital photos I'd gotten from Kite 78. They pointed out faces, remembering names. "That's Pudge. He always stole my bread roll. That's Braids. She used to put wildflowers in her hair." They talked about people I didn't know, a childhood I had no part in, sometimes laughing, sometimes falling silent. I sat nearby and just listened. I felt like an intruder in a private world, but watching them huddled so close together, I felt a deep sense of peace. That night, I went back to the hotel alone. Clara was staying with Ivy. She said they had 20 years of secrets to catch up on. I lay on the king-size bed, and for the first time, it felt massive and empty. I picked up my phone to text Clara, then put it down. Tonight belonged to them. I shouldn't interrupt. The next day, I went to pick them up. Ivy answered the door. She looked refreshed, a new light in her eyes. "Morning," I said. "Hey, sis is still asleep," she whispered. We talked until dawn. I stepped inside and saw Clara curled up on the bed, sleeping soundly with a smile on her face. The giant teddy bear was tucked in beside her. We decided to head back to California. Ivy was coming with us. She wanted to see the place where her sister had built a life. Before we left, Ivy handed the keys to her apartment back to the landlord. She only had one small suitcase with her. She said she was leaving the past behind. She was starting over. I drove on the way back. They sat in the back seat, chattering nonstop. They talked about everything from embarrassing childhood moments to first crushes, from the best boba tea shops to which TV shows to binge watch. I listened to their laughter and watched their identical faces in the rearview mirror. A single thought crossed my mind. My life was about to get a lot more interesting. One Clara was a handful. Now I had a matching set. I sighed, but I couldn't stop the smile from spreading across my face. We got back to our condo in California as evening fell. When I opened the door, everything was just as I'd left it, clean, tidy, and filled with the quiet comfort of home. Ivy stood at the threshold, looking at our small but cozy space with a dazed expression. "Sis, this is your home." "Our home," Clara corrected, pulling her inside. "From now on, this is your home, too." Our bedroom was small, with just one queen-size bed. That night, Clara announced matter-of-factly, "Ivy, you'll sleep with me." I blinked. Ivy looked stunned. "But what about Ethan?" "He can sleep on the sofa," Clara declared, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. I said nothing. Fine. It wasn't like I could argue. I was, after all, the only non-biological family member in the house now. I silently gathered my pillow and a blanket and made my way to the living room. As I lay on the sofa, I could hear their muffled laughter and whispers coming from the bedroom. And even though I'd been kicked out of my own bed, I didn't feel the slightest bit resentful. In fact, it felt like our home was suddenly more complete. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the pictures from the Vegas trip. There wasn't a single landscape shot. They were all photos of Clara and Ivy. The two of them at the beach in matching outfits, smiling like kids. Them at a food stall, feeding each other bites of a candied apple. In every photo, their faces were relaxed and joyful. They just looked like they belonged together. I set one of the photos as my phone's wallpaper. Looking at the two identical smiles, I smiled too. This whole insane journey that started with me thinking I was catching a cheating spouse had somehow delivered the greatest surprise of my life. Ivy settled in with us. She was a bit reserved at first, but with Clara's encouragement, she began to open up. Soon, everything in the house started appearing in pairs. Matching mugs, matching slippers, matching pajamas. Sometimes I'd come home from work to find them both in identical sweatsuits, wearing the same face mask, watching TV on the sofa. I often couldn't tell them apart until one of them called me Han, and the other called me Ethan. The neighbors were baffled. They saw a second Clara suddenly living in our condo, and the gossips started flying. Some thought we were having marital problems, and Clara's sister had come to mediate. One wilder rumor suggested I had a woman on the side. Finally, Clara had to drag Ivy around and introduce her to everyone. This is my twin sister, Ivy. She just moved back from working abroad. She'd explain, using a story that sounded impressive enough to stop the questions. And just like that, everyone in the complex knew that Mrs. Grant had a twin sister, a high-powered executive who was now back in the States. Ivy didn't rush to find a job. Instead, she started studying. She enrolled in classes to get her GED, determined to finish the education she'd abandoned. She said she wanted to be a teacher, too. So, every day, Clara went to work at her school, and Ivy stayed home and studied. I come home to find them working side by side under the warm glow of a lamp. One preparing lesson plans, the other solving algebra problems. It was a quiet, beautiful scene. Life went on, not with a bang, but with the gentle rhythm of this new, surprising reality. My bizarre business trip, the days of stalking and investigating, the DNA report, it all became a shared secret between the three of us. Occasionally, Ivy would poke me playfully. Hey, Ethan, I hear you thought my sister was cheating on you, and we're about to hire a PI. My face would turn red, and I'd clear my throat to cover my embarrassment. Clara would be laughing so hard she couldn't stand up straight. Then she'd come over and pat my back. Thank you, honey, she'd say. You went through so much for our family. Yes, family. I used to think family was just me and Clara. Two sets of chopsticks, one roof over our heads. Now I understood. Family could also be three people. It could be a mess of daily routines and two lives connected by blood, finally woven back together. Watching these two women, who bickered and teased but loved each other more fiercely than anyone, I realized something. The best decision I ever made in my life probably wasn't marrying Clara. It was that night in the lobby of that Las Vegas hotel when I chose not to explode in anger. When I chose, instead, to find the truth. Because of that choice, I didn't lose my wife. I gained a sister, and with her a whole new, wonderful life.